But Paul never quite leaves it there, because he says at the beginning of that wonderful Philippian passage, this is what you've got to do as well. And he's not saying to us, you've got to die on a cross in the same way that Jesus did, because that was part of the unique ministry that Jesus had to this world, to live for this world and to die for this world. But he is saying that in the same way, you are called to go out into this world and to live among the people. And I guess that's one of the reasons why this morning I was so delighted to hear about your ministry to the school. Because that is a great ministry. For so much of that Christendom period, we expected people to come and to join us. You know, when we had our great missions, when we had our evangelistic crusades, we invited the people to come and join us. And they did. And many, many people came to Christ through that time. And it may still happen in that way. But the story of the early church is of the people being among the people. As you look at the great story of Pentecost, you see the early Christians, they met together, they prayed, they worshipped, in just the way that we've been doing this morning. But then they went out among the people. When the people heard the gospel in their own language, when they asked that question, what is going on? As they experienced the miracle of Pentecost, they heard it because the early Christians were out among them. They were there with them. And the story of the early church through that whole pre-Christendom period is being with the people. When there was tragedy among the people, when there were fires, when there were plagues, that was where the Christians were found. And continually people were asking the question, why? Why are you here with us at this time of difficulty? Why are you caring for us? And so the church grew in an amazing way. And somehow when we entered the Christendom period, we lost something of that. And even as evangelicals, we lost something of that. You know, one of the greatly misunderstood texts is in Romans 12, where Paul encourages us to be different. And I'll just read that. In some of the old translations, it says, don't be conformed to the world. In the translation I've got, it says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. So often we interpreted that we should be physically separate, that we should be over here, and that the world was over there. But Paul's injunction in Romans chapter 12 is all about our behavior. It's all about living in a way that witnesses to the fact that we have had that inward transformation as people, something which is going on. And so we have an extra capacity to love and to care for people. But Paul's assumption, because this is the way he preached, acted, and encouraged the church himself, was that we would be there among the people. And so our worship is much more than coming and singing and praising God on a Sunday morning or a Sunday evening whenever you choose to do that. The New Testament concept of worship, not just the New Testament, the Old Testament, the Romans concept of worship is offering our bodies as a living sacrifice that God can speak through that God can minister through to the people. And that means being out among the people. Morris, as your minister, is not the one who does ministry on behalf of the people, on behalf of the congregation. Morris's role as a pastor, my role as a leader of our movement, is to encourage our people to be the missionaries. You are the missionaries. In this post-Christendom era, we are all called to be missionaries. In a sense, we always were, but it's so much more obvious now that that is what is needed to happen. Now, that may make you ask, but I haven't got the gifts to do that. But the calling is to go out and live among the people, and I believe to provoke that question. Our calling as far as our communal gatherings, in the same way as we see in Acts chapter 1 and Acts chapter 2, is to encourage each other and prepare ourselves to go out and be among the people. This is a crucial part of our Christian experience. But we are a mission people. That is our calling. We're called to go out there and provoke that question. Our time is going, and so I want to share one story. Yeah, we'll see how we're going. I may share two stories. When I was called as a pastor to Wellington Central Baptist Church in 1990, I arrived and I met a small group of people who were a part of the church, about 30 people, who had been meeting together to pray and seek God's mind about a new ministry in the city, a ministry in the tough part of the city, Upper Cuba Street, if you know Wellington. That was the area they had their eye on. It's the red light part of the city. It's where a number of the addicts and homeless people had gathered over the years. And after about 18 months of searching God's mind and praying, we moved into that part of the city and we took over a shop and we established a ministry called Still Waters. And it was a drop-in centre. And we opened late on a Friday night and a Saturday night, and we were there at other times as well. And we were a Christian presence in that part of the city. Now, we wanted to see people come to know Jesus. That was why we were there. But the group worked out a really interesting protocol. And that protocol was that nobody who was a Christian in that setting was allowed to initiate a Christian conversation. That's quite odd in a way, isn't it? We weren't allowed to initiate a Christian conversation. And it was because we wanted to go into that part of the city and win the trust of the people, become their friends, and see what would happen. We believed that the Spirit would create openings. I used to love going along to Still Waters. I quite often went along on a Friday night to do the late shift, along with a few others, between 10 and 12, and I'd talk to the guys with their glue bags and some of the homeless people and this sort of thing. I have never been in a mission context where there has been more natural or more Christian conversation generally. Because we were continually being asked, why are you here? And people would ask us about what it meant to be a Christian. Their curiosity was aroused simply because we were there. And it was wonderfully encouraging. And over time, we formed partnerships with other groups in the city. There were young people who chose to fully commit themselves to the work of Still Waters and chose to live in houses where they would welcome the poor and the homeless in the city to come and live with them. There were several houses established in that way. A worshipping community grew up as part of that. We came into partnership with a group called Urban Vision.